The workshop intends to describe some common approaches to remedify certain defects in pedagogy for construction and architecture. I hope that we will have an enlightening and an interactive 2-day venture which is beneficial to all our participants. I now request Professor Bandana Jain, Head of the Department, School of Architecture and Planning, GD Goenka University, who has been the backbone to us and this event, to deliver a welcome note to the speakers and the participants. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Tolika. Success is not the key to happiness. Happiness is the key to success. If you love what you do, success will follow you. Good morning, honorable participants and speakers. I am Bandana Jain. On behalf of the GD Goenka University, it gives me an immense pleasure to welcome you all to the first day of the national workshop, which is conducted in collaboration with COA TRC Bhopal. I would like to take this opportunity to extend a very warm welcome to our eminent speakers, architect T.S. Ravichandran and Dr. Amarnath CV. Through this workshop, we would like to address how to bridge the gap between theory and practice in construction, integration of BIM in construction education, and many more aspects related to construction pedagogy. Looking forward to a perfect morning, and with once again welcoming the participants for joining this event, I pass on the baton to Tulika. Over to you, Tulika.
Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your kind words. I now take the privilege to express gratitude to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Tabriz Ahmed, for gracing the workshop by his presence. Welcome, sir. I request you to kindly deliver a keynote speech to our participants who have joined in from various parts of the nation.
Thank you, Tulika.
Yes, sir.
Uh, Let me welcome you all in the very important program that is the 2 days national workshop on pedagogy of construction in architectural education. It made a great pleasure to see a lot of participants from all over the country. I am sure this shows the value of the program and also this shows the importance of the program. Let me congratulate Dr. Bandana Jain, our HOD for School of Architecture and Planning, to make the event a grand success because we see a lot of participation from all over the country. This shows that this is very popular program. The topic is very, very topical and very important, that pedagogy of construction in architectural education, because we know that the society is very fast changing, and this is a kind of education that we have to see the kind of their flavor, their interest, and their requirement, and we have to plan anything for their benefit. And if you see earlier, it was taking too much time to change the kind of culture, change the kind of the flavor and taste. But you can see that every day, in fact, every 6 months, we are going to get the new kind of design coming, new flavor is coming, and very fast we are going to get internationalization. That's why I think now there may be chances of the big gap between what is the taught in the classroom and what is happening in the industry. So first challenge is that how we are going to bridge the gap between the classroom kind of the intervention or our curriculum planning and curriculum delivery, and what is actually required the skill sets in the market. Because anybody who is getting the education for the architectural education, he is supposed to provide some kind of value add to the society in terms of designing the architecture. The way the market is changing, we are going to have the lot of material options, because we used to earlier, if you go to 100 years back, it was only iron and steel. But now we have so many items available for designing purpose. For example, you can have polymers, you can have the high-tech kind of the materials that may be providing a very light kind of the weight, very sophisticated, very good color, and very good kind of the comfort and all. It may be corrosion free, it may be long lasting. So my point is that there is lot of options are there, and lot of research can be done in terms of the quality of the material you can use for the planning. That may reduce the cost, that may reduce the kind of the weight, It also may provide a longer kind of the life to the item. This shows that this particular education require a lot of research, lot of creativity, innovation. That is our duty as a faculty, as a university. We have to do lot of intervention. So we will be able to provide the cutting edge curriculum and cutting edge education to the students. So once they will pass out, they will not be feeling that different what is happening in the market, because the market is very fast changing. So what I suggest that let us have very updated curriculum, which is synced to the industry. And also we have to focus mostly on the skill education, because right now there is no problem with the knowledge you can get already in so many social media is there, you can get also in the Google, so many journals are there. So the now the content is not a challenge. The challenge is that how to inculcate the skill in the student, how to make them apply the knowledge what they have got in the classroom in the real conditions, and then we can provide them the cutting edge industry oriented education. This way I think we can then go to next level by redesigning the courses, changing the pedagogy and changing the teaching learning process in the classroom, and also try to take a lot of help from the technology, because earlier it was a big challenge that we are not having technology, but right now because of the use of the internet technology, a lot of online journals, now we are doing this program all online. So my point is that there is a lot of technology can be used in the education sector, especially in the education of the architecture, and this may be providing the lot of level playing field to go to the next level. I'm very happy to see the program is having a lot of participation, and also what we see, lot of keynote speakers are there. They'll be speaking on different aspects of the kind of the program. Let me also thank the Council of Architecture Training and Research Center Bhopal for collaborating in this program. Let me welcome you all and wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your encouraging words. I am honored to welcome Professor Dr. Navneet Munot, Honorary Director, Council of Architecture, Training and Research Center, Bhopal, who had immensely supported and guiding us in conceptualizing and organizing this workshop. Sir, I request you to kindly say a few words to our participants. Sir, you are on mute.
Now, I am audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, Tulika. So, Namaskar. On behalf of the COATRC Bhopal, I, Dr. Navneet Munot, Honorary Director of the COATRC Bhopal, welcome all the participants and experts for this national online workshop for students, academicians, and practicing architects on pedagogy of construction in architectural education. In the last decade, a lot of architectural schools in the developed nations reconsidered and reformed the structure of their curricula. In the context of these reforms, a radical reallocation of teaching time took place. A number of new subjects areas were added. The importance of some other subjects areas were diminished, and few new forms of specialization were introduced to architectural education. Likewise, in this decade, there is a transformation which is happening again, which is redefining the overall profile of the architect in today's contemporary society. And this may influence the educational strategy required, as well as in order for this profile to be ensured and succeed in today's world. In this context, one of the issues that seems to have gathered an increasing interest in the teaching of construction in architectural education. More specifically, this issue has three complementary dimensions. The first one concerns the contemporary content of the area in the school curriculum, and the third concern the accomplished method for the transmission of the knowledge of the subject area. The main characteristics that could be distinguished behind these dimensions is that the present teaching method and practicing of construction are widely questioned. the cushioning of the effectiveness of the position. The content and the pedagogy of construction appears completely and openly in every debate on architectural education. It is interesting to note that a great number of reforms in schools of architecture have attempted to interfere with the teaching of construction, always with the perspective to stress out its importance and to point out its role in the education of an architecture student. The question that arises is whether it would be possible for some characteristics of new orientation of construction teaching to be noted, given the plethora of pedagogic approaches as well as richness of the dynamic of contemporary reforms in architectural education. Such an attempt would be a particularly difficult task given the numerous proposals. Nevertheless, one could take this risk to suggest a number of characteristics which were not part of previous approaches to the pedagogy of this subject area and which seem to form a new basis on which what we could call a new construction culture may bloom. As per the present scenario, a number of architecture institutes and colleges graduate students as qualified architects and allows some of these newly graduate architects to start their profession practice. Some of these newly graduate architects also want to be an entrepreneur, but they possess less insights about the construction. So, to introduce the budding architects, academicians
पानी
about
मटर
the about the bridging the gap between theory and practice in architectural construction, integration of BIM in construction education, innovation in construction pedagogy, learning by doing, and upcoming building materials and construction techniques. The COA New Delhi has initiated the program to train all architects in this regard from across the country. As a result of this, its desire to address similar concern within the academia as well as practice, the COA New Delhi also decided to open up its academic and research wing through the establishment of COA TRCs at 5 zones in India, with Bhopal being one of its center. Through the TRC Bhopal, the COA New Delhi is organizing various events intending to update all the students, academicians, and architects on the latest trend and paradigm taking place at national and international level in the architecture fraternity. I'm honored to announce that the TRC Bhopal has completed more than 2.5 years its establishment and has successfully organized many events in these last 2.5 years, in which more than 8,000 students, academicians, and practicing architects have got benefited. As per the feedbacks received from the participants, the enriching knowledge and skill sets they have gained from these events and programs have been of immense help to them for extending the horizon of their personal and professional growth. We also invite all the COA registered institutes to collaborate with the TRC Bhopal for organizing short-term training program, teacher training program, faculty development program on a national level. Such initiatives will further allow the exchange of intellectual among the member of the fraternity as well as provide a platform of interaction with each other. Once again, I welcome all the participants and experts who will be the part of this training program. My best wishes to organizing team for the success of this 2 days event. Thank you. Over to you, Tulika.
Yeah. Thank you so much, sir, for your enlightening words. We feel honored that we are associated with COA TRC Bhopal for this workshop. Now, moving to the core, the workshop has been conceptualized in 4 different sessions spanning over 2 days, which enumerate various aspects of architectural construction pedagogy. The first panel consists of speakers who represent different viewpoints and specializations. First in line, we have session 1 for the day, which revolves around bridging the gap between theory and practice in architectural construction. The speaker of the session is architect T.S. Ravichandran, currently associated as Associate Vice President, Design Management, Vatika Group, Gurgaon. Architect Ravichandran's work reflects 29 years of strong experience portraying a synergy between industry and academics with attention to detail in architecture, construction, interiors, landscape, and urban design. He has had a varied career, consistently delivering high quality projects, primarily in Delhi NCR and also in the states of Rajasthan, Andhra Pradesh, Himachal Pradesh, and Karnataka. He has channelized energies between equal weightage to industry and academics and has gained hands on experience in building construction in the formative years of his profession, that is 1992 to 96. He had the pow- uh, he had the proud privilege of being trained by master architect Laurie Baker in vernacular masonry techniques at La Tour in 1994 while doing the rehabilitation program for the earthquake victims. Having worked for top developers of luxury residential developments, that is DLF, IREO, and Vatica, as well as esteemed non-profit organizations such as Development Alternatives and GRAM. He has continually imparted design and construction lessons at prestigious architectural institutions that include SPA New Delhi, Sushant School of Art and Architecture Gurgaon, and IIT New Delhi to transfer tacit learning. He constantly endeavors to initiate, expand knowledge sharing platforms at workplaces and social media to foster idea exchange and innovation to enhance collaborative approach on design projects to set and practice highest standards in design quality, management, and coordination. Welcome, sir. We are very pleased to have you on board with us. I request you to please begin with the session. Meanwhile, I request all the participants to please post their questions in the chat box and please do not unmute yourself during the course of the session. If you want to take up question and answers, please ask in the question and answer session preceding this session. Over to you, sir. Sir, you are on mute. Yeah.
Is my screen visible to everybody?
Yes, sir, it is.
Well, at the outset, I must thank you, everybody. Thank you. And hello, everyone, and a very good morning. At the outset, I must profoundly be thankful to the School of Architecture and Planning, G.D. Goenka University, and the Council of Architecture Training and Research Center, Bhopal, to invited me to share my views on this knowledge exchange platform. I'm extremely grateful for this opportunity lent to me. But in this era of online communication, the uncertainty of consistent network connection lurks around. So in a case where I get disconnected due to a feeble network connection, I express my profuse apologies in advance and request you to bear with me under such circumstances. Now, before we plunge into the core subject of discussion, let's understand the prime parties that are involved in the making of a building. The architect, who's on the left-hand side in the picture, and the construction team, which is on the right-hand side of the picture. There are other contributors as well, but for the moment, we will restrict our spectrum to these teams and focus on these two sets of professionals. For that, we need to understand the respective roles and responsibilities of these prime people involved in the project. The architect, who is the creator of the building, and the principal coordinator of all allied services that form party to the building design. The architect is also responsible for preparing the relevant drawings and issuing the same to the site for purposes of execution. The construction engineer or engineers, that is the construction team, is the executor. Based on the drawings issued by the architect, the construction engineer manages the activities at the site, construction site. Is that very simple? Isn't it? But the process isn't as smooth. It might be simple, but it isn't smooth as it appears to be. Hitches occur during the construction phase, and the reasons? Manifold. Now let's try and simulate a typical scene at a site inspection during the construction phase. Just to dramatize this a little bit, let us try and create a situation where there is a dual dialogue between an architect and an executing agency. The setting is the inspection site. The architect intentively studies through the issued drawing. The architect moves around the site and notices a wall that he has designed. The architect observes and points a flaw in the construction. He speaks to the engineer. What have you done to my wall? It looks so ugly. Plaster smeared all over the wall. I had intended it to be an exposed brick masonry with recessed pointing. Oh my God, what a mess. Now, he also further says and exclaims, and it's not in line with my drawings. Why wasn't the drawing referred to while constructing? A shower of cross accusations follow, each party accusing one another. You are to blame. No, you are to blame. I thought you understood. Why is it expected of me to go through the pain in making drawings when it cannot be constructed properly? Why were the drawings not referred to? End of scene. But let's pause a bit and try analyzing the unfortunate situation that has just occurred at site, and more so, its cause. A few questions do arise though. Were the drawings correct? Or did the executing agency not understand them properly? Where might be the gaps? What could be the reasons? Aren't the gaps wide? How can we prevent such occurrences? Academicians must ponder over this grave situation at this point. It all stems from the institutions that we learn our subjects from. Since I'm an academician and a person of the industry, one question has always bothered me as an academician. Have I merely given lessons in architecture, or have I imparted holistic knowledge to the students? The latter, which is the holistic knowledge, is my bigger concern. I constantly pondered over this till I gathered some thoughts on what could be the prerequisites for imparting holistic knowledge and compiled them into a three-pointer: skill sets, knowledge, and communication. The esteemed chairman, sir, has just about touched base and talked about skill set. Yes, it is a very vital thing that we must bear in mind. Now, the first pointer, skill sets. I'll slightly elaborate on this. Now, skill set, it is vital to understand that skill set is an instinct. Skill sets aid in performing activities. To perform an activity, One either has a particular skill set or one doesn't have it. It becomes very important at this juncture that one recognizes one's own skill sets and endeavors to pursue it in that direction. Unfortunately, in India, a student pursuing architectural studies and lacking the ability to design well is branded as unskilled. So very sad. It will utterly be wrong to determine it in this manner. There are a host of allied subjects that such a student can pursue and conjure fascinating results to attain excellence in the areas of one's own interests and abilities and skill sets. Say, for example, as all of us study architectural design and other subjects, but have we ever, even remotely, thought of knowing how design is managed? We all talk about teaching design. It's design, but how is the design managed? Or it should be managed? No, we don't. We don't learn that. Because design management as a subject doesn't constitute a part of the curriculum in architectural schools. Design management is an equally important aspect in the making of a building. This subject entails a complete process, starting from the stages of project inception. Now, project inception is a stage that precedes all the other stages. This stage comes even well before the architect or any other of the consultants are appointed. Design management sees through all the stages of design, construction, and finally culminates with building handing over to the beneficiary. In fact, this subject entails designing a process, and it can offer a student to create new processes, thus not limiting creativity to merely architectural or landscape or interior design domains. I firmly believe that everybody is bestowed with some creativity or the other. It is, however, latent until it is discovered and unearthed. This first pointer continued as skill set, a square peg in a round hole. I'm sure everyone in this forum would have matched the following exercises in schools, even at the primary level. Students invariably get into architectural study programs without any inkling of what's in store for them. Since the current curriculum so gravitates towards architectural design that students who are unable to be creative start feeling like the cube that I have shown in the picture on the left-hand side, unfit. And this is what I term as a square peg in a round hole. The results can be damaging. This is witnessed in abundance in institutions and beyond in the industry as well. It is the responsibility of an academician to recognize a student's skill sets, lodge him or her in the befitting niche, to channelize energies in that direction of a student's abilities. It is also applicable to organizations where heads of departments should position their staff, in appropriate places. The second point, knowledge. The world is progressing and technologies are evolving at rapid rates. It cannot be more damaging if a student is not abreast with the latest technologies and construction methods. Each discipline has achieved so much advancement that it has become an area of specialty by itself. Take, for example, facade design, a world of specialty by itself. Facades, as of today, are no longer static entities. They have become dynamic. Facades are designed as of today as an analog to the skin of a human being. We all know what analogous organs are. They're similar in function, but dissimilar in shape and structure. Facades these days are designed to breathe and even perform as osmoregulators. Facades are made to rotate to capture the turbulent wind energy to generate electricity for the building and also feed surplus energy to the city's grid. Likewise, there are other subjects of building design that have attained equal advancement, if not better. Now, it is not expected of an academician to have gained technical know-how on all the specialties. It's not possible. It's impossible. But it is at least expected of them in the least to offer the students an exposure to global concepts and practices by inviting experts and specialists from specific disciplines covered in the curriculum. I've heard academicians say, oh no, it's too early to teach them. To teach them a particular subject or a topic. Oh, they're far too immature to learn this at this stage, etc., etc. My belief lies in, and I very firmly believe, that it's never too early. Learning is a slow and gradual process and comes upon internalizing after the brain constantly ruminates on it repeatedly. We are all learning on a daily basis. Where I, with 29 years of experience, am still learning. A fellow colleague of mine who will be around 45 years is also learning. A student who's just about enrolled into architectural education is also all set to learn. So learning is endless. So it's never too early to learn or never too late. Each one of us is also aware that in the making of a building, several disciplines are involved. Each discipline is like an organ and requires the other to perform alongside. Now, likewise, all the disciplines so required do form a part of the curriculum in architectural studies and are also taught very well in colleges and institutions. I totally agree with that. But unfortunately, each one of them is taught individually without any cross-pollination and coordination between subjects. And that is what I term as learning in silos. The curriculum is bereft of a holistic approach to imparting architectural education. And this is a huge gap that I reckon in the prevalent architectural study programs. The third pointer, which is communication. Communication, in my belief, is the most vital amongst the list of points that I have enlisted, because it is communication which determines the quality of the end product. Sorry. Communication is the cause for either creating a gap or filling it up. It becomes an institute's responsibility to educate students to communicate very, very well. Now let's take a look at in what all manner does communication gets compromised and impacts the end product of the building. The first point, ambiguity. Communicating information on a drawing is synonymous to speaking. Unless one is clear in what one wishes to communicate, how can the listener or the reader, in the case of drawings, process information accurately? Lack of adequate information or annotation on a drawing opens vast doors for interpretation, and invariably the reader ends up in filling up the gaps to his or her own benefits. and causes deviation from the design intent. Basically, it means improper comprehension of the actual intent of the architect. Because a drawing lacks clinical communication, there's a grocer's variety of ambiguity. And the result, we are all aware of it. Upon a site inspection, the architect discovers that it hasn't been built to one's the specification that he or she has laid out, and the same drama happens as I explained in the previous slides. Detailing. The moment one utters this word, the immediate image drawn in one's mind is drawings on a scale of 1:1, 1:2, 1:5, 1:10, so on and so forth. Does actually detailing in its true sense mean that? No, it doesn't. Detailing lies in thinking. One has to think in detail to be able to put it on the paper. Drawings are merely means of communication. Drawings are an architect's representative. They convey the architect's thought to a reader in his or her absence. The reader could be an executing agency at site, or could be other departments in the organization, the client, technicians, and engineers of allied disciplines, or even a model maker for that matter. Students need to be taught well to think in detail. If it's in the thought, it will be drawn well on paper. And if drawn well, it will be constructed well on the ground. That is the actual essence. Now, a loose design package. In addition to pedagogical methods, gaps occur in practices that are followed even in the industry. Design packages are loose with lack of adequate coordination, information. This can also be termed as an ill-coordinated and a non-detailed design package. When parties dilute their due diligence and reduce the amount of contribution that the project demands, information transfer is compromised, and this impacts quality of the end product. Now, since I have laid so much stress on communication, I would like to cite an example with regards to lack of coordinated detailing and communication thereof. Now, a design package is a progressive documentational procedure, we all know of it, which entails several stages. It starts with the concept design stage, abbreviated as CD, followed by a schematic design stage, abbreviated as SD, then followed by a detailed design package or a stage, DD, and culminates with a good for construction stage, which is a GFC stage. Well, some expand DD as design development, but I prefer to term it as detailed design, because design keeps developing as one progresses to the next stage. So I prefer to term it as detailed design. Let me demonstrate where the gaps lie in current practice and how we can fill up the gaps to constitute a tight design package summary. By the way, the clients are also a party to creating the gaps in some manner or the other. I'll explain. In the prevalent practice, in the first stage, only the architect is appointed. When the project reaches stage number 2, which is the schematic stage, consultants of a few allied disciplines, namely structures, PHE, M&E, are appointed. We do not see the appointment of any other consultants, namely landscape, interiors, firefighting, IT, or kitchen consultant. For they are all equally important. They play a major contributory role in making of the design of a building. And so on and so forth. The other consultants, there is a huge palette of consultants. I will not extend it beyond, so on and so forth. They are brought in at the detailed design stage. When they come in, the views of the recently appointed consultants are tabled for, and a host of disagreements begin. This is not possible, that I need so much space, this is the way it has to be done. As a result, the pre-appointed consultants who put in yeoman efforts so far had to recede many steps to accommodate proposals put forth by the newly appointed consultants. The client doesn't fathom the waste of time and energy in rerunning the show again, resulting in time extensions on the project and eventually impacting clients' budgets. And this is what actually irritates and irks the client. But no fault of the consultants. It is the client who needs to also be told and advised by the architect appointed at the initial stages to be appointing all the other consultants for effective coordination. The client should bring in all the resources at the concept stage to maximize benefits on the project. This is how this gap could be filled in this situation. Well, another observation in the prevalent practice. While the architect is preparing a good for construction package following the detailed design package, the contractor is also concurrently working on the shop drawing package. Both parties submit respective packages at the same time, or one followed by the other, which have very minute relation to one another. And eventually, what gets constructed is based on the approved shop drawing that has very little semblance to the design intent. This can put the project in immense peril. Now, I would like to cite this with some drawings. These are some drawings of the elevation of a railing. Now, please note the annotation applied to the railing at different design stages in the prevalent practice. Concept stage, railing. Schematic stage, railing in metal, height as indicated. Chalo. Some advancement, some elaboration on the railing itself, fine. Accepted, taken. But lo, what happens at the detailed design stage? Railing in metal as indicated. Good for construction stage. Railing in metal as height as indicated. The same annotation. The annotation doesn't change at all. This has no mention of a host of other attributes that needs to be applied to the railing. My question is, how can a tenderer bid on such an undetailed annotated drawing? How is it possible? After a bidder gets appointed, based on the laid criteria, which invariably and usually is the lowest and the best technical quotation, a set of shop drawings submittal package arrives for the architect's review and approval. The quality of such a package leaves no room for imagination on how detailed it possibly would be. Does it allow any? It's no. Besides, one can quite imagine and estimate how loose the bid would be or would have been, which means that the bid will have huge scope for cost escalation, budget overruns, since the specification is not clear. This practice is so very flawed. Based on my past experience, I follow this practice and it is effective in the following manner. I have the first three stages remain the same. At the detailed design stage, I prepare a drawing package that is so replete with accurate information that it is good for purposes of tendering and accurate tendering. I don't proceed on to the next stage, that is this preparation of the good for construction drawing package, until the project is tendered and the contractor is appointed. Once the job is tendered and the contractor is appointed, shop drawings get submitted for my review and approval. So I wedge the shop drawing stage between the detailed design stage and good for construction stage. I review the shop drawing submittal through a fine-tooth comb for detecting deviations to the detailed design set of drawings. I then interface with the executing agency or agencies to maximize synergy between the two aforesaid packages and approve the shop drawings accordingly. Now, I take the approved set of shop drawings and integrate the vendor's details to issue a set of good for construction drawing package. The results are notably better, with a huge reduction in gaps and eventually a reduction in abortive work, because if there are gaps in it and it doesn't convey the constructed product, doesn't convey the architect's design intent, it is invariably subject to abortive work. It is broken down and reconstructed. Again, time overruns and cost escalations and budget overruns. Totally unacceptable to the client and very fair enough. If this method can be taught to the students, fresh graduates can be better prepared and equipped when they step into the industry. Let me run you through a quick, let me do a quick run on the way I annotate drawings as they make progress in design stages. As I said, the concept stage, I identified that the item is the railing. At the schematic stage, the annotation becomes slightly more elaborate. All the members of the railing are identified. That is the handrail, the baluster, the mid-rail, the bottom rail. They are indicated, they are identified, indicated, and annotated separately. Annotation at this stage also captures and indicates the size of the members, the material, and its profile. Say, for example, if you just take the first item as an example, it says the item is handrail, size is 80 into 40 mm, which is 3 mm thick, profile, rectangular, hollow box sections.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you please go on full screen mode?
I am on full screen mode. I'm sorry. Is it not visible?
Yeah,
Oh,
it
yes,
is visible, but in minimize.
It is microscope. Yeah, I guess only this part of the text is because I picked it up from my drawing set. So it is slightly illegible, but I will read it out. That is what it is. I will read it out. I'll read out the entire thing. I know it by heart, so I can have no problem reading it out.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, but I'm on full screen. I have not. Just to continue. At the detailed design stage, the annotation becomes more specific. The annotation specifies very clearly, leaving no ambiguity in understanding the surface expression and the process involved in installation / fixing / anchorage of any or all its members. As an example, if you refer to the first annotation, which mentions the handrail, the drawing specifies the following. Item, the handrail, size 80 by 40, 3 mm thick, profile, rectangular hollow box sections as dimensioned, This is what I have picked up from the schematic stage. Now I further detail it out. Material, mild steel. Finish, powder coat upon hot dip galvanization. RAL, color is RAL 7039. I mentioned the color also. I mentioned, go about further mentioning the texture. Suede, which is non-glossy. The process, all components shall be prefabricated at factory in line with approved shop drawings, with all welds ground smooth prior to hot dip galvanization and finishing. So I have mentioned a very brief of the process also involved in it. Now, I specifically am very emphatic on getting all the MS work, the mild steel work in the factory, because on-site welding is something that will be prone to the moment you do on-site welding, the hot dip galvanization coating is completely ruined, and and it is prone to all rusting and corrosion. So I have explained the process that I would want it to be as an architect. The installation and fixing. This member shall be fused, the handrail shall be fused to the baluster using welds, all fit for purpose and in line with the approved shop drawing and in compliance with the structural engineer's specifications, details, and recommendations. Now, since all the information is clear, now the bidder knows exactly what is in store and how much to quote. And trust me, this bid is very accurate. The next drawing is, my apologies for
Sorry,
because I have just...
Sorry again to interrupt, Ravi sir. If
Yeah.
you can, we are receiving the messages to maximize the view. If you can just go to the top right-hand corner, and there is a button which says View. If you can just click on View.
Just a minute, please. The top right-hand corner.
Yes, top right-hand corner. If you see there is View button, and if you click on the View button, in the end there is full screen. You just click on it if you go on to the full screen mode.
I am on full screen. The drawing is actually a copy clip, so even it is illegible to me. I can maximize it and show it.
It is not only this drawing, but even the earlier.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Okay.
But these are drawings, so...
No, not this view. Not this view. Go to the view of the Zoom link.
Go on the Zoom platform and right side top, you have got view.
That's right.
Go.
On the Zoom platform, if you go
Zoom
onto the
platform,
extreme
you
right,
got view.
I'm slightly, I belong to the old school, so I'm slightly unacquainted with this.
okay, we are able to manage. That's okay. But we just don't want to miss on anything, whatever you're saying. So just go to the Zoom platform. There is a view, the extreme right hand side. Just click on it.
Go ahead.
That's okay. I think we can continue. That's okay.
Sorry, I just I can zoom in further on the drawing to explain that that is possible. That is possible. That's quite possible. Is it better? Is it any better?
It's better. Yeah.
It's better. Okay, fine. Now I'm just trying to indicate as to what all do I get as a part of the shop drawing thing, and how I integrate my package with the shop drawing. Okay, so on the screen that you see is an approved set of shop drawings. Reflect that, and this approved set of shop drawings reflects that the detailed design drawing package formed the basis for it. Now, I will need to move on to the next slide, which is okay. This is it clearer? Is it better?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for confirming that. Yeah. So this is a good for construction drawing. This good for construction, this set of good for construction drawings is integrated with the shop drawing, shop run set. Note the call out details and the plan level indicators, which is 1, 2, and 3, which are picked up from the shop drawing set and integrated accordingly. Please note that the thickness of the members in which with the detailed design package indicated as 3 mm is now revised to 2.6 mm based on the availability of the profile or the section in the industry. Since the section thickness is lesser than what it was recommended earlier, so this goes to the structural engineers for validation. And upon due sign-off from the structural engineer on its structural stability, it is approved. This GFC drawing is now in line with the contractor's shop drawing. Now, if you can see the encircled information in number 10, which is number 10, this is also picked up from the shop drawing set. It indicates clearly where adjustments to the baluster spacing will be made by the contractor, and hence I have annotated it accordingly. The annotation reads, I will maximize it. Gap and members adjusted to fit. Gap shall be no less than 75% of the average adjacent gap between members and located as indicated in line with the shop drawings, which goes to show that, generally what happens is you start from one end and keep progressing to the other end, and whatever the site construction at site is not as accurate as that on the drawings. That's legitimate reason, and those uncertainties and those deviations are acceptable. But invariably, what happens is this goes, and the last railing, the gap between the last two balusters, is either this less or this wide, and that appears very awkward. So the adjustments I generally make is in the middle, so that it doesn't fall, or it's not unduly obtrusive, right? So, but I make it very clear that the gap of the adjacent members has to be not less than 75%. Anything less than 75% is visible. So if it is 100 mm and the next gap is 75 mm, it is not very starkly visible. So the adjustments have to be made accordingly, and that is what the shop drawing also captures, and my good for construction drawing also captures. Now, just to do a quick run of the comparison between these two practices, this is visible, isn't it? Is this visible?
Sir.
Yeah, fine, thank you.
Yes,
So, so the comparison is between prevalent practices and recommended practices. In the prevalent practice, a concept stage, a schematic stage, a detailed design stage, good for construction stage, and shop drawings. Now, recommended practices, the concept design, schematic design, detailed design, which is equivalent to a tender package, based on which the tender can be launched. Now, then comes a shop drawing package between the detailed design and good for construction. This is always beneficial, and so we can consider the bridged, and we have considered that the gap is bridged. On the drawings, if you can run a quick these things, look at the kind of, in the prevalent practice, look at the kind of information that is on the drawing, which is on the left-hand side, and compare it with the information that is supposed to be there on the drawings on the right-hand side. There's a huge difference. We all are aware of it, but I would recommend that it is put into practice in that manner. Now, coming to the main thing. Now, architectural education must include subject cross-pollination exercises during the course of studies. Studios of architectural design, interior design, landscape design, theory of design, history of design and construction must collaborate to impart holistic knowledge. The student needs to be made aware that the aforesaid subjects are a fragment and an integral part of the vast world of design. Academicians should improve or should provide exposure to global concepts and endeavor to adopt native technologies, that is, act locally. They must conduct capsules of short courses and workshops with specialists and vendors, etc., in line with the curriculum for effective assimilation and best value addition. The current design trend being parametric geometry, it becomes very vital to understand how it should be coordinated and constructed and not merely limited to resolve build forms using advanced graphic softwares such as 3D SketchUp or Rhino or Grasshopper as a plugin or many other things, 3ds Max or something. Studios should be used. I consider studios as laboratories, and studios are laboratories and not libraries. In the laboratories, the difference is that laboratories, you have a dialogue happening. Library is a monologue. In the libraries, you accept what the book gives you. But in studios, in laboratories, you conduct experiments. And students should understand it in this manner. And academicians should create a milieu where it's conducive for the students to conduct experiment at all times. I urge all students as a career path, I urge all students and young professionals who are in their formative years of their career should choose work venues that offer hands-on experience. It could be a site or an office which is sensitive to offering exposure to on-site construction. This practice will succor help to oneself and the firms they are working for, or a firm they will initiate and start on their own in future. Construction studios ideally should be at construction sites. Well, I understand the challenges that many a times it is not possible, but at least in some construction studios, one must take all the students and try and do the studio at the site. That is the best way to learn. And I've had the very proud and a good fortune of having on-site hands experience, working with institutions like the Development Alternatives and GRAM, for that matter. And I could come across and learn from none other than Mr. Laurie Baker. I'm proudly privileged, and I hope all the students should, learn the art of construction. Because if they learn construction, they will know how to understand the limitations of it and design accordingly. I'm not saying that one has to make compromises in design, but it's just that to get a fair knowledge of how it can be constructed becomes very vital while the mind is pondering and processing information on design processes. On this note, I firmly believe that we can bridge the gap between architectural education that is theory, and construction practice to a large extent, if not fully. My extreme gratitude for your kind attention and a patient hearing. Thank you so much. I'd like to invite questions and answer questions if there are any.
So yes, thank you, sir, for such an enthralling session. And the session has definitely helped in highlighting the persistent gaps in the architectural construction education and the recommendations which have been laid down by you in this session to bridge the gap between theory and practice were worthy and went beyond and cited useful cases from the industry. These gaps, if fulfilled in the academics, will ensure that the students are better equipped to have a taste of the diversities which exist in the industry. I now welcome all the participants to raise questions and clear their queries with Ravi Chandran sir. You can raise your hands and ask the questions. One of our participants has raised his hand. I request Hitesh kindly unmute and please ask the question.
Hello, sir.
Hello there. Hi.
Sir, I just by just looking at your concluding side, one thought came to my mind is what kind of role a contractor or a fabricator, or for that matter, any craftsman can play in architecture education, in school of architecture per se. Mm, how we can bring them in and make them part of our studio process.
Oh, yes. A good question. Thank you for asking. And it's a very, very relevant one because it is the person, the vendor, or a craftsman, as you rightly put it. I would give a lot of value to that terminology called craftsman. And I will use it in henceforth. Thank you, Mr. Hitesh, for that. So this craftsman knows the entire art of constructing, right? And he can bring about a lot of value addition in expanding the knowledge among students as to what the limitations of craftsmanship that is involved in it, all the processes that are involved in it, because that can actually open wide doors and expand a student's horizon while learning the process of design. We have done such similar exercises when been a part of the faculty at Sushant School of Art and Architecture. We have invited vendors and master craftsmen from varying disciplines, from different domain disciplines, and even from from heavy engineering equipment. Like earth moving machines and all that. They have been able to inculcate and kind of spread the utility of such machines and the way it can be brought into construction industry and the way a student can be made aware of how that particular equipment is used. So, and that will intensify and hone his knowledge in the whole process, the whole ambit and gambit of architectural education. I hope I have answered your question.
You are right in a sense that it makes students aware about the processes which are involved in the field.
Yes.
But at the same time, what I feel that it would make student aware about the value a craftsman can brought in our work, in design per se. Like there is a design input which you can actually borrow or take from craftsmen and their understanding about how things comes together, and
Yes.
that may enrich your work at the end as well. If we can inculcate it within our studio process, it may bring a very different kind of value into architectural design or a studio design itself, I think.
Yes, I totally so agree with you. They should be brought in. that is what I said. I mean, my concern always has been, and I've always endeavored to impart holistic knowledge. I mean, architectures, as I always have felt, it's a very small fraction of the world of design. And I've always tried to merge various subjects of architecture and try to merge them together to create a synergy between them. Like, for example, I was when I was doing the studios at SPA, we gave a building to design, a small residence to design. And we tried to ask the students if, because they were studying theory of design, so we tried to ask them to do a narrative on the best architectural style down the ages. It could be from Egyptian civilization until the fluidity of Zaha Hadid, for that matter, which is like 21st century, right? So whatever style they have most related to, could they incorporate that in their design? Could they make an elevation accordingly? So and I found that many people drew Art Deco as a part of elevation. They created wonders in doing in the layout planning on the basis of digital architecture, which is on the basis of Mondrian painting. So they did all that. So I totally agree with you. This has to be brought in into the architecture education as a part of it. Has to form a part of the curriculum. A collaborative approach has to form a part of the curriculum, which unfortunately currently it is not so.
Right. In our current form of education, we can bring them as visiting faculties rather than having practicing architects. We can have all the practitioners who work in the field of building can be brought as visiting faculty and involved in the process of teaching.
Yes, through small workshops, workshops and lectures. Possible. Why not? And it should be encouraged. That's a very good suggestion.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hitesh. I would like to see you on screen. You made a very valuable. Hi.
Hello.
Hello there. Hello. Thank you. Thanks for such a valuable contribution. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So we have another message in the chat box. So it is from Ayushi Jurani, and she's trying to ask that in pandemic and current prevailing situations, how can the site be brought to school for the students, while PPTs and YouTube videos remain the only source of online teaching?
Yes, I agree. Pandemic is an unfortunate circumstance that prevails currently, and I have come to a conclusion. I'm sure the fellow academicians also have felt the same, that architecture cannot be taught online. I'm sorry to say that, but we are equipped with this current situation. So what could be possibly done is, yes, if the academician can manage to visit the site and try and capture, of course, with the client's permission, capture the process of construction on a camera, and deliver a lecture and show them while conducting lessons. Or these days, video streaming is a prevalent practice. The advanced technology. Well, I have thought of doing that myself. That I should take the camera along with me, stream the video, and conduct an online class program while I am at the site. So that is one way of imparting such thing. That's the only way I can think of off the cuff and as an off the cuff answer. And should I develop more on this, and I can provide more feedback.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So, Ayushi, I hope it answers your question. And next in line, we have another raised hand by Raktim Saha. I request you to please unmute and ask your question.
Hi, sir.
Hi, Raktim. How are you doing? How are you doing?
I'm good. It's a really intriguing session today. Love to hear you back. This is regarding, you were talking about architecture and you have extended your domain into landscape format as well. So my question would be regarding site, and site could be formal, informal that we come across. It could be a different experience based that we talk about. And you have extensively worked with Vatica City. And I just wanted to know that along with architecture, we as an architect, we are human souls, and whenever we intervene in a certain site, we tend to marry or we tend to blend in ourselves with that particular site, right, sir? So I just wanted to know what are the challenges that we come across. I'm talking about professional domain, not academics, but what are the challenges that you have come across with your site? And if we overlook that, if we cheat, right? If we neglect or deflect certain set of roles and responsibilities that are, yelled out by the site, what happens? What are the drawbacks or what are the demerits that we earn? And that apparently reflects on our build profile also. So I wanted to know about that. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Rattan, you being a landscape architect, and I have found that invariably, and the moment anybody thinks about landscape in a very small perspective, is about planting. Although landscape architecture does expand its tentacles far and wide and beyond planting. But yes, I must say that planting constitutes a significant part of landscape. Now, what I have seen, what I have faced in projects is that the lack of awareness of the architects in in creating a construction environment or that is landscape friendly. Or an example, or for that particularly for the matter, is plant friendly. And coming to soil depths. Now, soil depths are the depths are so shallow that you're trying to, it becomes very, very difficult for the plants to flourish in that. Soil depths is one major concern that I have. So I implore that and I urge all architects who design should consider soil depths if they want their developments that they have designed flourishing and with lush green development. Invariably, the soil depths don't go beyond 450 mm or 500 maximum 500 mm, which is, and the drawings indicate trees. It's not possible, guys. It's just not possible. The 400, 500 mm is required, and out of it, the net soil depth that is available is only 300 mm, which is only good for grass, not even for shrub cover. The shrub cover or the shrub requires a minimum soil depth, clear soil depth of 600 mm, if not anything, nothing less than 450 mm, at least 600 mm ideally. And the trees require at least 1.2 minimum of clear soil depths. So 1.2 meters, and we are given only 600 mm, or of which part of it is taken by the screed and all the filter media. How can the trees flourish? And invariably, and the result of which is basically they start doing planting beds, raised planter beds. And initially, the landscape architect wouldn't have even thought of that. He would have wanted everything seamless. But as a result of a lack of awareness by the principal architect, I'm sorry, I'm not here to offend anybody's sentiments out here, but I'm just trying to say that there is a lack of awareness, and I don't shy away from doing that. So, so the entire concept of wanting to a seamless, I'm sure the architect also might have wanted a seamless kind of green bed in his sprawling landscape, but eventually has these sprouts of structures. So where goes the intent? The intent goes for a 6. It's totally different, it's deviated. So this is something that I have constantly faced, and I have constantly endeavored to provide good soil depths to facilitate the landscape architect, who's also equally constituent, an equal constituent part of the building design. So this is, I hope I've answered your question, Dr.
Yes, sir. Yes, you have. Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So yes, sir, there's another question in the chat box. Sir, can an extra mandatory internship during the initial days in architecture course bridge the gap between the student and the practice, or the theory and the practice, as it might help to aware the student in the crucial initial period?
Fine. Very, very good question. I would like to see the person who's asking these questions. It's always, again, as I said, I'm a person who likes to have an online, face-to-face this thing. Otherwise, can you please switch the camera on, whoever asked
Yeah.
this question?
Nikunj Dwivedi, can you
Uh,
please switch on your camera?
yes, good morning, sir. Actually, I was on my PC. I will just connect with my phone.
No
Just a
worries.
minute.
While you connect, I'll answer your query. Well, you see, before the student, when does the student go for his internship? At the end of the fourth year or something like that, which is almost at the fag end of his architectural education, which is like he has covered 80% of it. Now, what happens in that 80% is what is of concern to me. Have we inculcated and have we imparted enough knowledge? Has we pumped in enough knowledge in him? Or furthermore, has he internalized enough knowledge to be able to be an intern? Invariably, what happens is when when a student goes as an intern, he's blank. He has no idea as to what happens in the office. So these are some things that as I recommended. If this is practice, and if this is the kind of education that is imparted, and a student is made aware, students are made aware that this is what happens in the office. So, and prepare them accordingly. They'll be able to contribute more to the office right from day one because they've known what is happening in the offices. So I would strongly recommend that these are first introduced and captured and in the curriculum and taught accordingly, and then the architect, the student, is all set to go for internship. There's one more thing that I must add. Because these practices are all the different domains are taught in synergy with one another as a collaborative approach, the student is also aware what is interior design, what is in store for landscape design, what is in store for even product design for that matter, architectural design, all these different domains. And then he's in a bit of clarity to see what kind of office does he want to intern in. There are offices which specialize only in interiors. There are offices which are landscape designs. There are offices which do only architecture. There are offices which do products also. And if through these workshops, if a student is made aware of facades, a student might want to go into the world of facade specialization, and one might want to intern under an office which does only facades. So be it. So in the architecture, in these 4 years, a student is made aware of all the things, and he can actually select what he wants to choose in profession or further studies. If a student gets interned in an office which does interior design or landscape design and wants to pursue that as a formal study program at the master's level, at the graduate level, he already has the ingredients in it, and he has the exposure of having worked in a landscape firm and a sort of good recommendation, and he gets into a very good college. It could be India, it could be abroad, and it is always welcome. I hope I have answered that question. Mr. Dwivedi, I hope
Yes,
I've answered your question.
Yes, sir, sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, everyone. Tulika is joining back. She's dropped her internet connection. Kindly be patient.
I requested the forum to bear with me, so I will bear with Tulika as well. Internet connections are very uncertain, as unpredictable as weather. I must say that I've had good fortune and the experience to be a part of Colonel Virendra Kumar Malik's studio, and in trying to create a synergy between design and construction. It was a construction studio, but oriented towards and the design was oriented towards how it can be constructed. Thank you, Malik sir, for that.
Yes. So there is another question. There's another question from Kuntal Shah. Thank you very much, sir, for insightful session. My question is, how do we see green building rating role and importance in architectural construction as a necessity?
Okay. I was just mentioning about this the semester that I spent with Colonel Malik in imparting sustainable technologies as a means of doing a green building design. There are several methods to do it, and I think this is of current importance. That is the reason why the previous semester was totally structured and oriented and focused on imparting green building technologies as a part of construction studio, because it is more of construction and technicality than of design. Yes, it does have to be integrated into design as far as the surface expression is concerned. And also, yes, when it deals with other subjects like climatology, for that matter, yes. But to be able to learn how to construct a green building becomes very vital, because that is more vast. And we've done an exercise on that, and we've come out with some fascinating results from students. And I'm sure that can be practiced on other schools as well. I hope I've answered this question.
Yes, Kuntal Shah, I hope this answers your question. So we move on to the next question. Yes, very rightly said, Architect Ravichandran, that green building rating is, it plays an important role, rating or not, but by default, the green building component should be incorporated in the architecture construction. Okay, so next question is from Masira Ansari. Can it be possible to merge the constitution classes with the on-site projects from first semester level? And if yes, how do we achieve it?
Oh, yes, definitely it should be. There is no question of can it be. Can doesn't arise at all for me. It should be. It has to be merged. Construction, as I said in the lecture, construction is a subject which should not be taught. The theory part of it should be taught at this construction sites. Yes, I totally agree with you on that. And I just suggested one way of doing it in this manner, be it an offline or an online format. You see, construction site have their own limitations. They cannot entertain a group of 40 or 80. The classroom, which usually constitutes somewhere around 100 to 120, because there are 2 or 3 sections involved in it. To taking a huge mass of people to a construction site, to the construction spot, it becomes very challenging. So I would suggest that what could be the best way to do it is a group of students, say limiting to 3 or 4, and the academician, the teacher involved in it, can request the construction project engineer at site, and could capture certain videos and learn of the procedure that is involved in construction, and that can be brought to the classroom and imparted and being and taught in that manner. Or else, yes, the students can actually be online and do an the group of 4 or 5 go online and do an on-streaming whatever it's called. I don't even know the proper terminology. Stream the video, if I'm correct, accordingly. So that is, it should be taught in that manner. Well, a door cannot be taught using Mackay. What's the use in using Mackay or Shetley or something? The door exists in the studio. Go to the door and teach what the door is, how it is fixed. It is there. Construction exists all around you. It's already, things are constructed. So bookish knowledge doesn't actually help. It is necessary. I'm not trying to discount the knowledge that the book has, but it's only as a ready reckoner. It should be used as a ready reckoner and not as a means of education. I hope I've answered this question.
I also request the participants, because tomorrow I'll be discussing the same thing which Ravi was saying right now, that how we can impart construction to our students by doing things on sites, making small groups. So all your questions will be answered tomorrow in my session.
You can leave something in store for Colonel Malik as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Ravi sir. Thank you so much. And thank you, Virendra sir, for popping in and justifying the thing. And yes, there are many more questions coming up, but I apologize to the participants. We are running really tight on schedule, and I request the participants to email your questions to Ravi sir. If you've got any, I will let you know the email address in the chat box in a while. We have the next speaker who is on board with us, that is Dr. Amarnath. Thank you, Ravi sir. It was a very interactive session with you, and we are hoping to hear from you more.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks for giving me this opportunity. I much appreciate it. Thank you so much.